Millionaire saw her poor nanny donate blood to save her son and takes incredible action. Jennifer Harrison was in the middle of a crucial meeting when the phone rang. It was the kind of call nobody wants to receive. Her son had been in an accident at home and was being rushed to the hospital. She didn't even say goodbye to the investors, just grabbed her purse and ran out. On her way to Memorial General Hospital in New York City, her hands trembled on the steering wheel. Ethan was only 16. What had happened? The call was so rushed she could barely understand. Something about a fall, lots of blood, critical condition. The traffic seemed to conspire against her. Every red light felt like an eternity. Jennifer sped up whenever possible, her heart beating out of rhythm. When she arrived at the hospital, she encountered a scene that terrified her. Doctors ran back and forth. Nurses spoke in codes she couldn't understand. A receptionist tried to make her fill out forms, but Jennifer ignored her and headed straight for where the glass doors swung open and shut urgently. "Ma'am, you can't go in there," a nurse shouted. "My son! Where is my son?" Jennifer practically yelled, her voice echoing through the sterile white hallway. A tall doctor in an impeccable lab coat approached her. His expression was serious, professional, but there was something in his eyes that made Jennifer's stomach churn. "Are you Ethan Harrison's mother?" "Yes, what happened? How is he?" "Your son had a serious accident at home. He fell down your internal staircase and hit his head. There was significant internal bleeding. We're doing everything we can, but—" The doctor hesitated, and that silence was more frightening than any words. "But what?" Jennifer grabbed the doctor's arm, her fingers digging into the fabric of his coat. "He needs an urgent blood transfusion. The problem is his blood type is extremely rare. AB negative, with an additional factor that complicates everything. We're contacting all the blood banks in the region, but we're not sure we'll get it in time." Jennifer's legs almost gave way. She leaned against the wall, trying to process this information. Her son was right there, just a few feet away, fighting for his life, and she could do nothing. Absolutely nothing. "What about me? Can I donate?" she asked, desperate. "We already checked. You have type O positive. It's not compatible in this specific situation. We need someone with his exact type and factor." "And his father?" Even as she asked, Jennifer knew it was useless. Richard was in Chicago, at a tech convention. Even if he caught the first flight, he wouldn't make it in time. "We'll contact him too, but the time—" The doctor didn't need to finish the sentence. Jennifer felt the world spin. She had built a financial empire from scratch, ran one of the country's largest consulting firms, negotiated million-dollar contracts as if it were the most natural thing in the world. But at that moment, faced with the possibility of losing her son, all her power and money were useless. That's when she heard a familiar voice, yet strangely distant. "Doctor, can I get tested? To see if I'm a match?" Jennifer turned and saw Dorothy, the nanny who had worked in her home for almost 10 years. She wore her characteristic yellow uniform, her red hair pulled back in a flawless bun. But there was something different in her eyes at that moment, a determination Jennifer had never noticed before. "Dorothy, what are you doing here?" Jennifer could barely form coherent sentences. "I was at home when it happened, Mrs. Harrison. It was awful." Ethan was coming down the stairs with his laptop in his hand, distracted by something on the screen. "I warned him to be careful, but—" Dorothy's voice faltered for a moment. "He slipped on the last steps and hit his head on the corner of the marble console. There was a lot of blood. I called the ambulance immediately, came with him the whole way, holding his hand, saying everything would be all right." Jennifer Harrison realized then that she hadn't thought about how Ethan got to the hospital, who accompanied him, who stayed by his side in the worst moments. She simply assumed everything had been magically resolved. But no, it was Dorothy. It was the nanny she barely looked in the eyes who held her son's hand while he bled. "The test," Jennifer began, but the doctor was already addressing Dorothy. "Do you know your blood type?" he asked. "AB negative," replied Dorothy, with a certainty that made everyone around stop for a second. The doctor exchanged a quick glance with the nurse beside him. "It's very rare. We'll run the full tests immediately. If you truly have the compatible factor, you could save his life." "Do whatever it takes," said Dorothy, without hesitating for even a second. In the following 2 hours, Jennifer experienced every second as if it were an eternity. Dorothy was taken for compatibility testing, while doctors continued stabilizing Ethan. Jennifer finally managed to see him through the glass of the emergency room. He was pale, so pale he looked unreal. Tubes came out of his arm, machines beeped around him. That wasn't her son. It couldn't be. A nurse brought coffee that Jennifer couldn't drink. Her hands trembled so much she spilled half the liquid on the floor. She tried calling Richard again, but it went straight to voicemail. She sent desperate messages, all unanswered. He must have been mid-flight, without phone access, completely unreachable when she needed him most. No, when Ethan needed him most. Jennifer sat in a hard plastic chair and realized she was alone. Completely alone. She had no living parents, was an only child, and her relationship with Richard was more of a business partnership than a real marriage. They barely saw each other, each too busy with their own careers. And now, in the most terrifying moment of her life, there was no one by her side, except Dorothy, the nanny she paid to care for Ethan while she worked 16 hours a day, the woman she barely knew, with whom she exchanged only quick instructions in the morning, and sometimes not even that. How many times had Jennifer come home late at night and Dorothy had already left? How many times had she left notes with orders about Ethan's meals, about schedules, about tasks, without ever asking how Dorothy was, if she had family, if she had dreams? Jennifer closed her eyes and, for the first time in years, felt tears streaming down her face. Not the controlled tears she allowed during strategic moments in tough negotiations, but real painful tears that came from a deep place she had learned to bury long ago. "Miss Harrison?" She opened her eyes and saw Dorothy standing before her. The nanny had a small bandage on her arm where blood had been drawn for the tests. "Dorothy." Jennifer tried to stand up, but her legs wouldn't respond. "The doctor said I'll be able to donate. I'm compatible. Fully compatible." There was a small smile on Dorothy's face, a smile of relief and hope. Jennifer couldn't speak. She just nodded as more tears fell. Dorothy sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance as she always did. But this time, Jennifer reached out and touched the nanny's arm. "Thank you," was all she could say. But those two words carried the weight of years of distance, coldness, indifference. Dorothy just nodded, her eyes also glistening with held-back tears. "He's a good boy." "A wonderful boy," said Dorothy, her voice low and full of emotion. "I'll do everything to help him." And Jennifer realized in that moment that Dorothy wasn't speaking as an employee doing her job. She was speaking as someone who truly loved Ethan, as someone who genuinely cared for him, who knew him, who spent enough time with him to understand who he really was. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The transfusion happened an hour later. Jennifer watched through another glass window as Dorothy's blood flowed through transparent tubes into her son's body. It was almost surreal seeing that physical connection between two people she had always kept in separate worlds. Dorothy in the kitchen, in Ethan's room, in the service quarters. Ethan in his room, in the expensive private school, in the places Jennifer considered appropriate for the son of a successful businesswoman. But there, in that moment, there was no separation. Blood didn't know social classes, didn't care about bank accounts or addresses. The blood of a simple woman was saving her son's life, and Jennifer had never felt so small in her entire life. The doctor came out of the room and gave a positive sign. The transfusion had been successful. Ethan was stable. He would need to stay hospitalized for a few days, but the worst was over. Jennifer felt her knees weaken. This time it was Dorothy who held her, preventing her from falling. The nanny, who had just donated blood, who should have been weak and needing rest, was there, supporting the employer who had never given her more than cold orders and a paycheck at the end of the month. "He'll be fine," Dorothy whispered, and there was so much certainty in her voice that Jennifer believed it. That night, Jennifer insisted that Dorothy stay at the hospital. She reserved a private room next to Ethan's, but the nanny refused. She said she needed to go back home, that she had commitments, that she would return early the next day. Jennifer didn't insist, although part of her wanted to. For the first time, she wanted the company of that woman. She wanted to talk, understand, get to know who the person who had saved her son really was. But Dorothy left, and Jennifer stayed alone in the room next to Ethan's, looking at the hospital's white ceiling, unable to sleep. Her phone vibrated countless times with work messages, urgent emails, calls from partners and clients. She ignored them all. For the first time in 15 years of her career, work didn't matter. Richard finally called at 3 in the morning. He was terrified, speaking quickly, saying he would take the first flight back. Jennifer told him about the transfusion, about Dorothy, about how everything had happened. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "The nanny donated blood for him?" Richard asked, and there was something in his voice that Jennifer couldn't identify. Surprise? Guilt? "Yes, she saved him, Richard. Literally saved his life." "We need to reward her properly," was his reply, practical and direct, like everything in his life. Jennifer hung up the phone, feeling a strange emptiness in her chest. Reward her properly. As if they could put a price on a life. As if money solved everything. And for years Jennifer had believed exactly that. That money solved everything. That money bought comfort, security, happiness. But on that dark hospital night, she realized there were things money couldn't buy. And one of them was lying in the room next door, breathing softly, alive thanks to a woman she barely knew. The next morning, Jennifer woke up with the sun hitting her face through the thin curtains of the hospital room. It took a moment to remember where she was, and then everything came back at once. The accident, the transfusion, Ethan. She rushed to his room and found Dorothy already there, sitting in a chair beside the bed, holding the boy's hand. Ethan was still asleep, but there was color in his face again. He looked peaceful, his soft, youthful features relaxed in sleep. "You came back early," Jennifer said, her voice hoarse from sleep and emotion. Dorothy looked at her and smiled gently. "I couldn't stay home. I needed to see how he was doing." "You should be resting. You donated blood yesterday." "I'm fine, I've been through this before." That phrase hung in the air between them. Jennifer wanted to ask what Dorothy meant by that, but the doctor entered the room before she could speak. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison. I have good news. Ethan is responding very well. All his vital signs are stable. He should wake up any moment now." The doctor checked some papers on his clipboard. It was very lucky to find a compatible donor so quickly. AB negative with the specific factor he has is extremely rare. Only 1 in 10,000 people has that exact blood type. 1 in 10,000, Jennifer repeated, looking at Dorothy with renewed astonishment. "Yes, your employee is a true medical rarity," the doctor smiled at Dorothy. "And a heroine, I'd say." Dorothy looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Jennifer noticed she was wearing the same clothes as the day before, the yellow uniform already slightly wrinkled. Had she slept properly? Where did she live again? Jennifer realized with shame that she didn't know Dorothy's address. In 10 years of work, she had never bothered to find out where her nanny lived, with whom, what her life was like outside those walls that Jennifer paid her to keep clean and organized. Ethan began to stir. His eyes blinked, confused, trying to focus. When they finally opened completely, the first thing he saw was Dorothy. "Dorothy?" His voice was weak, hoarse. "Hi, my dear. How are you feeling?" Dorothy squeezed his hand gently, and Jennifer noticed there were tears in the nanny's eyes. "What happened? My head." Ethan tried to raise his hand to touch his head, but he had an IV in his arm and the movement was limited. "You had an accident at home, remember? You fell down the stairs," Dorothy explained in a calm, reassuring voice. Ethan's eyes moved around the room and then found his mother standing near the door. There was a moment of silence. "Mom? You're here?" Those words felt like a punch to Jennifer's stomach. The surprise in his voice, as if her presence there was something unexpected, unusual. And it was. How many times had she actually been present in his life in recent years? How many dinners had she skipped? How many nights had she come home when he was already asleep? How many mornings had she left before he woke up? "Of course I'm here." Jennifer approached the bed, trying to smile, but tears got in the way. Where else would I be? Ethan didn't answer, but something in his eyes said it all. He knew. He always knew that work came first, that meetings were more important, that clients couldn't wait, but he could. "Did you donate blood for me?" Ethan asked, looking back at Dorothy. "Yes, I did," Dorothy replied, smiling through tears. "Thank you," Ethan squeezed her hand tighter. "You saved me." And Jennifer, watching that scene, felt something crack inside her chest. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was shame, it was pain. It was the crushing weight of realizing she had outsourced the love for her own son, that Dorothy knew Ethan better than she did. That Jennifer Harrison was there during the important moments, while Patricia was in meeting rooms discussing numbers and strategies that now seemed completely empty and meaningless. The following days at the hospital established a strange routine. Ethan needed constant observation, so Patricia decided to stay with him. She cancelled all meetings, delegated her most important projects to her partners, and for the first time in years, she simply stopped. Dorothy also went to the hospital every day. She arrived early in the morning, always bringing something Ethan liked to eat. Once she brought homemade chocolate truffles because Ethan mentioned he was craving them. Another time, she brought a deck of cards they used to play with at home. Patricia watched everything, every small gesture, every knowing look between Dorothy and her son, and each observation felt like a needle prick in her heart. One afternoon, when Ethan was sleeping after a physical therapy session, Patricia and Dorothy were alone in the room. The silence between them was heavy, full of unspoken things. "Dorothy," Patricia began, her voice low so as not to wake Ethan, "I need to ask you something." The nanny looked at her expectantly. "That day you said you had donated blood before. What did you mean?" Dorothy averted her gaze, fixing it on the window where the New York City sun shone brightly. "A long time ago, Mrs. Harrison, in another life." "Tell me," Patricia insisted, and there was something in her voice that made Dorothy look back at her, a vulnerability the nanny had never seen in her employer before. Dorothy took a deep breath, her hands clasped in her lap. "I had a son, Michael. He would be the same age as Ethan now." Her voice was low, controlled, but Patricia could see the old pain shining in her eyes. "Would be?" Patricia asked, though she already knew the answer. "He had complications when he was little. He needed treatment, expensive medications, special care. I worked wherever I could, but it was never enough. I could never save enough for what he needed. And then—" Dorothy's voice broke, and she had to stop to compose herself. Patricia felt her heart race. She didn't want to hear the rest, but at the same time she needed to. He got very sick. He needed an urgent blood transfusion, just like Ethan. I donated, of course. I would do anything for him, but it wasn't enough. He needed other treatments, medication I couldn't afford. And the healthcare system— Dorothy laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, without joy. "The healthcare system doesn't care much about poor people, Mrs. Harrison. We wait. We beg. We watch our children waste away while trying to fill out paperwork after paperwork. Dorothy, He was 9 years old when he passed away," Dorothy continued, as if now that she had started she needed to finish. 9 years old. He should have been playing ball, going to school, arguing with friends. But he was in a hospital bed, getting weaker and weaker, while I watched, unable to do anything. Tears were now flowing freely down Dorothy's face. Patricia wanted to say something. Anything, but there were no words. What do you say to pain like that? After he was gone, I was lost for a while. I didn't know what to do, how to go on. My husband couldn't bear the pain and left. I was alone with huge debts from doctors and hospitals, with no will to live. Dorothy wiped her tears with the back of her hand. That's when I got the job at your house. Ethan was little, about 6 years old. And when I looked at him for the first time, I saw my Michael, the same age my son was when he was still well. And I promised myself that I would take care of him, that I would give him all the love and attention I couldn't give my son in the end. Patricia didn't realize she was crying until she felt the tears wetting her lap. She had hired Dorothy 10 years ago through an agency. She never asked about her life, her story, her pains. She simply handed her son over to that woman's care and returned to work, confident she was doing the right thing, that she was providing the best for Ethan by building a financial empire. But she wasn't giving the best, she was giving money. And money, she discovered too late, doesn't replace presence. It doesn't replace love. It doesn't replace a mother. "Why did you never tell me this?" Jennifer asked, her voice broken. "Because you never asked," Dorothy replied, simple and direct. There was no accusation in her voice, just fact, a painful and undeniable truth. Jennifer knew Dorothy was right. In 10 years, she had never sat down to have coffee with the nanny. She never asked how her day had been. She never showed interest in the person who spent more time with her son than she did. "When I saw Ethan in that ambulance, bleeding, scared," Dorothy continued, now looking at the young man sleeping in the bed, "I went back to that day with Michael, and I thought, no, not again, I won't let this happen again. If my blood can save him, take it all. Take every drop. Just don't take another child from me." "Another child," Jennifer repeated softly. "That's how I see him, Mrs. Harrison. I know I have no right, I know he isn't mine, but he's like a son to me. I watched him grow up, taught him how to tie his shoes, stayed up with him when he had nightmares, helped with his schoolwork, listened about his first crush, about problems with friends, about fears and dreams. And I love him as if he came from me." Jennifer could no longer speak. She just cried, sobbing quietly so as not to wake Ethan. All her achievements, all the money, all the company she built, none of it mattered in the face of this brutal truth. She had let another woman raise her son. And worse, Dorothy had done a better job than she ever would. That night, Jennifer couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about everything Dorothy had told her. She thought about the son the nanny had lost, about the unimaginable pain of watching a child pass away for lack of resources. She thought about how Dorothy had cared for Ethan all these years, giving him the love she still had saved for Michael. And then she thought of herself, of her choices, of her priorities. Jennifer had always prided herself on being a strong, independent woman who didn't need anyone. She built her company from scratch, faced sexism in the corporate world, proved she was as capable as any man. She was a warrior, a winner. At least that's what she told herself every morning when she left home at 6 and returned at midnight. But at what cost? Ethan was discharged a week later. Jennifer insisted he stay home resting, and surprisingly he agreed. Or maybe it wasn't so surprising. He had been through trauma, had nearly lost his life. It was natural that he wanted to be at home, in a safe place. What Jennifer didn't expect was his reaction when they arrived home. The Harrison mansion was in a gated community in the Upper East Side, an upscale area of New York City. It was a huge house with 5 bedrooms, a pool, a well-kept garden, all the luxuries money could buy. But when Ethan entered, leaning on Dorothy on one side and Jennifer on the other, he looked around as if seeing everything for the first time. "This house is so empty," he murmured, more to himself than to them. Jennifer felt the words like a slap. Empty. He was right. The house was beautiful, decorated by an expensive designer, full of brand-name furniture and original artwork. But it was empty. There were no photos on the walls, no loving mess, no signs of real life. Everything was always in place, always clean, always perfect, and always cold. Dorothy helped Ethan to his room, and Jennifer followed them. The boy's room was large, with a king-size bed, a state-of-the-art TV, a powerful computer, all the electronics a teenager could want. But Jennifer noticed, for the first time really noticed, the small details that made that room special. There was a colorful blanket on the bed that she didn't recognize. Dorothy explained she had knitted it for him last winter, when Ethan said he felt cold at night. There was a small cactus on the windowsill with a funny note stuck to it. "Don't kill me, please. Signed, Spike." The handwriting was Dorothy's. There were photos stuck on the wall, not in expensive frames, but simply glued of simple moments. Ethan eating brigadeiro with chocolate on his face, Ethan laughing during a card game, Ethan making a silly face. In none of these photos was Jennifer present. "Do you need anything else, my dear?" Dorothy asked as she adjusted Ethan's pillows. "No, Dorothy, thank you, for everything." Ethan held her hand for a moment, and the gesture was so full of affection that Jennifer had to look away. "Rest, I'll make that broth you like for dinner." "The chicken soup with lemon?" "That one." Dorothy smiled and stroked Ethan's hair before leaving the room. Jennifer stood there, motionless near the door, not knowing what to do or say. Ethan looked at her for a moment, then picked up the remote. "Mum, you don't have to stay here. I know you must have work piled up." "I want to stay," Jennifer said quickly, perhaps too quickly. Ethan looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Surprise, distrust, hope. "Okay," he said finally, turning his attention back to the TV. Jennifer sat in a chair in the corner of the room, feeling out of place in her own son's space. They stayed there for about half an hour, the silence between them filled only by the sound of the television. Jennifer wanted to say something, but didn't know what. She wanted to get closer, but didn't know how. The chasm between her and her son seemed insurmountable. "Mom?" Ethan said suddenly, still looking at the TV. "Yes? Why are you really here?" The question caught Jennifer off guard. "You're my son. You had an accident. Where else would I be?" "I don't know. At the office? In a meeting? Solving some business crisis?" There was no anger in his voice, just resignation, and that was somehow worse. "Ethan, it's not a criticism, Mom. It's just, I'm not used to having you around. It's weird." Every word was a blade. Jennifer wanted to defend herself, list all the reasons why she worked so hard, all the sacrifices she made, all the things she provided for him. But all those justifications seemed hollow now. "I know I haven't been the best mother," Jennifer began, choosing her words carefully. "I know I worked too much, that I let other things slide. But everything I did for you, to give you a comfortable life, opportunities, a secure future." Ethan finally looked at her, his light green eyes so similar to hers. "I know, Mom, and I'm grateful. Really. School is great. The house is beautiful. I never lacked for anything, but—" "But," Jennifer insisted, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the rest. "But sometimes I just wished you were home for dinner, or that you'd drive me to school once in a while, or that you'd watch a movie with me on the weekend. Simple things, you know. Things money can't buy." "I can change," the words came out before Jennifer could think them. "I want to change." Ethan smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I've heard that before, Mom. You always say you're going to change, that you're going to work less, that you're going to spend more time at home. But you never change. It's always one more urgent meeting, one more important client, one more project that can't wait." Jennifer knew he was right. She had made these promises before, on missed birthdays, at school performances she didn't attend, on cancelled weekends. And she always broke those promises. Work always came first. But something was different now. Maybe it was seeing Ethan in that hospital bed, so pale and fragile. Maybe it was hearing Dorothy's story and realizing how precious and fragile the time we have with our loved ones is. Maybe she had simply reached a breaking point where she could no longer continue living the way she had been. "This time will be different," Jennifer said, and there was a conviction in her voice that surprised even herself. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I almost lost you." Jennifer stood up and approached the bed, sitting on the edge. "And when I thought I was going to lose you, I realized that nothing I've built matters if I don't have you. The company, the money, the success, it's all empty without you." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching for sincerity, for truth. Jennifer held his hand and he didn't pull away. "I'll try to believe you," he said finally. "But you need to show me, Mom, not with words, with actions." "I'll show you," Jennifer promised, squeezing his hand. "Every day." That night, for the first time in years, Jennifer had dinner at home. Dorothy made the chicken soup that Ethan loved, and the three of them sat at the kitchen table. Not the big formal dining table in the living room, but the small kitchen table where Dorothy and Ethan usually had their meals. The conversation was awkward at first. Jennifer wasn't used to this kind of domestic intimacy, but gradually, as Dorothy told funny stories about the messes Ethan used to make when he was little, she began to relax. "Remember when he decided he wanted to be a chef?" Dorothy laughed, her eyes shining. "He was about 8 years old and decided to make breakfast by himself. When I came down, the kitchen was a disaster zone. There was egg on the wall, flour on the floor, spilled milk everywhere. "Hey, I was trying to make pancakes," Ethan protested, but he was laughing too. "Pancakes? That looked more like cement mix," Dorothy teased, "but you were so proud of them that I ate them all, even though I thought I was going to break a tooth." "You didn't eat them. You gave them to the neighbor's dog." "Oh, you found out?" Dorothy pretended to be surprised, making Ethan laugh even harder. Jennifer watched the interaction between the two with a lump in her throat. She wasn't there that day. She didn't see Ethan trying to make pancakes. She didn't help clean up the mess. She didn't share that moment. She was probably in some important meeting that she couldn't even remember now. "Mom, are you okay?" Ethan asked, noticing her expression. "Yes," Jennifer forced a smile. I'm happy to be here." And it was true. Despite the pain of realizing everything she had missed, she was happy to be there, in that moment, sharing a simple meal with her son and with the woman who raised him when she wasn't around. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following days, Jennifer kept her promise. She continued working from home, attending video meetings, but always taking breaks to spend time with Ethan. They watched movies together, something she hadn't done since he was very small. They talked about school, about his friends, about simple everyday things. And Jennifer watched Dorothy. She saw how the nanny cared for Ethan with such dedication and love, how she knew exactly how he liked his tea, how she adjusted his pillow without him needing to ask, how she always had a word of encouragement when he felt frustrated with his recovery. A week after being discharged, Jennifer decided she needed to know more about Dorothy. She needed to understand who this woman was, who had become so essential in her life without her even realizing it. One afternoon, when Ethan was napping, Jennifer found Dorothy in the laundry room, folding clothes. It was a small functional space designed to be invisible to the residents of the house. Jennifer now realized she had built her home this way, with clear spaces between her life and the lives of those who worked for her. "Dorothy, do you have a minute?" The nanny looked up, surprised. Jennifer rarely came to the service area. "Of course, Mrs. Harrison. Is something wrong?" No. Jennifer entered the room, feeling strangely nervous. "I just wanted to talk." Dorothy set aside the clothes she was folding, giving Jennifer her full attention. There was something in her eyes, a cautious curiosity, as if she wasn't used to this kind of attention from her employer. "Do you live far from here?" Jennifer asked, and then realized how ridiculous the question was. Dorothy had worked for her for 10 years, and she didn't know where she lived. "I live in South Bronx, Mrs. Harrison. I take 2 buses to get here." South Bronx. Jennifer knew it was a peripheral area of New York City, far away, with a reputation for being dangerous. Dorothy woke up early every day and traveled almost 2 hours to get to their home. "Do you have family? Children besides Michael?" Dorothy hesitated, and Jennifer immediately regretted bringing it up. But then the nanny answered, her voice soft. "I have 2 grandchildren, Kevin and Emma. My daughter Ashley ended up leaving when the children were little. She had problems, you know. She never could adjust after what happened to Michael. The children stayed with me." "How old are they?" "Kevin is 7. Emma is 5. Jennifer quickly did the math. Dorothy had 2 young grandchildren living with her, worked 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and still had to make that long bus trip every day. "And how do you manage? Who takes care of them while you're here?" "My sister Barbara watches them during the day. She doesn't work, has health problems, so she can't do much. But at least she doesn't leave them alone." "And when do you see them?" "At night, when I get home. I wake up with them in the morning before I leave. On Sundays, we're together." There was a subtle sadness in her voice, an unspoken wish for more time. Jennifer felt a weight form in her stomach. Dorothy had 2 young children she barely saw because she spent all day taking care of Ethan. It was like a cruel irony. She neglected her own grandchildren to care for Jennifer's son. "Why did you never tell me about them?" Dorothy smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Mrs. Harrison never asked. And besides, personal problems shouldn't interfere with work. That's what I was always taught." But you're not just work, Dorothy. You're a person, with a life, a family, needs. I know, Mrs. Harrison, but in this world, people like me can't afford to mix things up. I need this job. I need the salary to support my grandchildren, so I do what I have to do. Dorothy's pragmatic honesty was painful to hear. Jennifer had always known academically that she lived in a world of privilege, but she had never really faced it so directly. "What is your house like?" Jennifer asked, genuinely curious. Dorothy hesitated again, as if unsure how much she should share. "It's small. 2 bedrooms. I share one with the children. My sister stays in the other. The structure isn't the best. There's damp in the walls. The roof leaks when it rains heavily. But it's our home." Jennifer tried to imagine. Dorothy, who kept the Harrison mansion impeccable, who took care of every detail, who ensured everything was perfect, lived in a house with water damage and a leaking roof. "You've worked for me for 10 years, Dorothy. Why have you never asked for a raise? Why have you never asked for help?" "Because you already pay a fair wage, Mrs. Harrison. Above market rate, actually. And help? Like I said, I don't mix personal problems with work. But by donating blood for Ethan, you did mix. You went beyond any professional obligation." "That was different," Dorothy said, her voice growing firmer. "That was about a boy I love. It has nothing to do with work or salary. I would have done it anyway." And there it was again, that inconvenient and wonderful truth. Dorothy loved Ethan, not because she was paid to, but simply because she loved him. Can I meet your grandchildren?" Jennifer asked suddenly, surprising herself as much as Dorothy. "Meet my grandchildren?" Dorothy blinked, confused. "Yes, if you don't mind. I'd like to meet them, get to know your life outside of here." Dorothy looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to gauge the sincerity of the offer. "I don't mind," she said finally. "But why, Mrs. Harrison? Why now?" It was a good question. Why now, after 10 years of polite indifference? Jennifer didn't have a simple answer. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was gratitude. Maybe it was simply the beginning of an awakening, an understanding that the people around her had complex lives and stories that deserved to be known. "Because you saved my son," Jennifer said, "and because I realized I know nothing about the person who has been more important in his life than I have." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth and pain. "Then come on Sunday," Dorothy said softly. "On Sunday I make a special lunch for the kids. Nothing too elaborate, but there's always plenty of love involved." "I would love that," Jennifer replied, and felt the tears sting her eyes again. When Jennifer told Ethan about the plan to visit Dorothy's house, he was surprised. "Really? You're going to the South Bronx?" There was disbelief in his voice. "Why not?" "I don't know. It's just... You never go to places like that." "Like what?" Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable. "You know, poor places, outskirts neighborhoods. You always avoid those parts of the city." Jennifer wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. He was right. Her life was carefully curated to avoid discomfort. She lived in a gated community, worked in an office in an upscale neighborhood, frequented expensive restaurants and safe places. Poverty existed only as a statistic in her reports, not as something real and tangible. "Well, it's time to change that," she said. "Can I come with you?" "You're still recovering." "Mum, I'm fine. And Dorothy's grandchildren are my age from when I was a kid. It would be cool to meet them." Jennifer looked at her son and saw a sparkle in his eyes that she hadn't seen in a long time. Enthusiasm, genuine interest. And she realized that Ethan, despite all his privileges, had a generous heart. He certainly didn't inherit that from her. He probably learned it from Dorothy. "All right," she agreed. "We'll go together." Sunday arrived grey and rainy. Jennifer insisted on driving, refusing Dorothy's offer to meet directly there. She wanted to make that journey, to see the route Dorothy took every day. The trip took over an hour and a half through New York City traffic. As they moved away from the gated community, the landscape changed. The beautiful, well-maintained buildings gave way to simpler constructions. The wide, tree-lined streets turned into narrow alleys. The perfect asphalt gave way to potholes and patches. Ethan looked out the window in silence, absorbing everything. Jennifer also watched, feeling a growing discomfort. It wasn't exactly fear, but a sharp awareness of her own privilege. When they finally reached the address Dorothy had given, Jennifer had to stop the car and take a deep breath. The house was exactly as Dorothy had described, small, with clear signs of water damage on the outside walls, the paint peeling, the gate rusty. But there was also a small window box with colorful flowers. There were clean curtains in the windows. There was a sense of care, of dignity, even amidst the poverty. Dorothy opened the door before they could knock, as if she had been waiting. She wasn't wearing her yellow uniform. She was in simple, clean clothes, and her hair was down instead of in her usual bun. Jennifer realized she had never seen Dorothy like this, as a person instead of an employee. "Mrs. Harrison, Ethan, please, come in." Dorothy moved aside to let them enter. The house was indeed very small. The living room and kitchen were practically one room, but it was impeccably clean and organized. There was an old but well-kept sofa, a small TV, and homemade shelves filled with photos and small trinkets. Two children appeared shyly behind Dorothy, a thin boy with big, curious eyes, and a little girl with braids and a simple but clean dress. "These are Kevin and Emma," Dorothy introduced, her hands on the children's shoulders. "Kids, this is Mrs. Harrison and Ethan." "Is she Ethan's mum?" the boy, Kevin, asked, his eyes wide. "Yes," Dorothy confirmed. "Grandma always talks about you," Emma said, looking at Ethan with admiration. "She says you're very smart and handsome." Ethan blushed but smiled. "Your grandma is really nice," he said, crouching down to be at the children's level. "She takes very good care of me." "She takes care of everybody," Kevin stated with childish pride. Jennifer felt her heart tighten. Those children clearly adored Dorothy, just like Ethan did. She was the center of different worlds, holding everyone together with her quiet strength. An older woman, whom Jennifer assumed was Barbara, Dorothy's sister, was sitting in a chair in the corner. She waved but didn't get up. Jennifer noticed she was holding a cane and her legs were bandaged. "My sister Barbara," Dorothy introduced. "She has circulation problems in her legs, so she can't walk much." "It's nice to meet you," Jennifer said, trying to sound natural but feeling completely out of her element. Lunch was an eye-opening experience. Dorothy served rice, beans, a simple meat dish, and salad. It was humble, home-cooked food, but delicious. The children chatted non-stop, asking Ethan questions about his school, his games, his life. Ethan answered patiently, clearly delighted with the attention. Jennifer watched everything, barely touching her food. She saw how Dorothy served the children first, how she made sure they ate well before serving herself. She saw how she discreetly checked if Barbara was comfortable, if she needed anything. She saw how she managed that small world with the same dedication she gave to the Harrison household. And then she realized something that hit her like a lightning bolt. Dorothy was always taking care of everyone. At home, she cared for the children and her sister. At work, she cared for Ethan and the house. But who was taking care of Dorothy? When did she have time for herself? When did she rest? "Dorothy," Jennifer said suddenly, interrupting a story Kevin was telling. "Do you have another job besides ours?" The table fell silent. Dorothy looked at her, surprised by the question. "Yes, I do, Mrs. Harrison. On Wednesday and Thursday nights, after I leave your house, I clean a small office near the subway station. And on Sunday afternoons, I do some side jobs washing clothes for a neighbor." "So you work every day?" Ethan asked, clearly shocked. "I need to, my dear. The bills don't pay themselves." Jennifer did quick calculations in her head. Dorothy worked at least 12 hours a day, 6 days at their house, plus 3 nights a week at another job, plus Sunday afternoons. When did she sleep? When did she have a moment just for herself? "This isn't right," Jennifer said, more to herself than to the others. "That's life, Mrs. Harrison," Dorothy replied with a tired smile. "Many people live like this." And Jennifer knew she was right. Millions of people lived like this, working multiple jobs, barely making ends meet, while she worried about which restaurant to choose for a business lunch. After lunch, while Ethan played with the children in the small backyard, Jennifer helped Dorothy wash the dishes. It was something she hadn't done in years, always having someone do it for her. "Thank you for having us here," Jennifer said while drying a plate. Don't mention it, it was a pleasure, Dorothy replied, her hands submerged in the soapy water. Dorothy, I want to do something for you. The nanny stopped washing the dishes and looked at Jennifer cautiously. Mrs. Harrison, I didn't do what I did expecting a reward. I know. But still, I want to. I need to. You don't have to. Really? What if I want to? Jennifer insisted. Let me do this, please. Dorothy studied her for a long moment, then sighed. What do you have in mind? First, I'm going to triple your salary. Mrs. Harrison. Dorothy nearly dropped the plate she was washing. And I'll pay to renovate your house, everything. Fix the roof, the walls, everything that needs fixing. That's too much. No, it's not. It's not even close to enough for what you've done. And there's more. Jennifer took a deep breath. I want you to move, you, the children, and your sister. I have a property in Park Slope that's empty. It's not huge, but it has 3 bedrooms. It's well maintained, in a safe neighborhood. You can live there. Rent-free. Dorothy simply stared at her, open-mouthed. Why? Was all she could ask. Because you saved my son. Because you raised my son when I was too busy to do it. Because you deserve it. You and your children deserve something better than this. And what do you want in return? The question took Jennifer by surprise. Nothing. I don't want anything. Everyone wants something, Mrs. Harrison. I've learned that in life. Jennifer put the plate she was drying aside and turned completely to Dorothy. You're right. I do want something, she admitted. I want you to teach me. Teach you? Teach you what? How to be a mother, how to be present, how to love someone without thinking in terms of transactions and benefits. You know how to do that. I don't. But I want to learn. Dorothy had tears in her eyes now. She wiped her wet hands on her apron and turned to Jennifer. You don't have to pay me for that, Mrs. Harrison. I know, but I want to take care of you the way you took care of my family. Please, Dorothy, let me do this. There was a long silence, filled only by the sounds of the children laughing outside. All right, Dorothy said finally, her voice choked. But on one condition. Anything. You will really change. You'll spend more time with Ethan. You'll be present in his life. You'll be the mother he deserves. Because money and nice houses can't replace that, Mrs. Harrison. Nothing can. I promise, Jennifer said, and for the first time in her life made a promise she knew she would keep. Not out of obligation or strategy, but because she finally understood what truly mattered. The 2 women embraced there, in that small, humble kitchen, while the sound of children laughing echoed from the backyard. And Jennifer felt something break inside her, something hard and cold that she had carried for years. And in its place, something new began to grow, something warm and frightening and wonderful. Humanity, she realized. She was finally becoming human again. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The following weeks were a whirlwind of changes. Jennifer hired a team to do a complete renovation on the Park Slope house she had mentioned. It was a property she had bought years ago as an investment and had been empty ever since. Now seeing it transformed into a home for Dorothy and her family gave Jennifer a satisfaction that no business deal had ever provided. While the renovation was happening, Jennifer began making other changes in her life. She delegated more responsibilities at her company, hired a chief operating officer to handle day-to-day matters, and drastically reduced her work hours. Her partners were worried at first. They called meetings to discuss whether she was having some kind of crisis. But Jennifer stood firm. She explained that she needed a better balance, that she had other priorities besides the company. Richard's reaction was more complicated. When he finally returned from Chicago, a week after Ethan's accident, he found a different wife. Jennifer was no longer working late, no longer obsessed with the next big deal. What's happening to you? He asked one night after dinner. Ethan had gone to his room, and they were alone in the living room. I'm changing my priorities, Jennifer replied simply. Because of the accident? Because of many things. The accident was what made me stop and see what I was missing. Richard looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. And what were you missing? Our son, Richard. We were missing our son. He's growing up and we're not here to see it. Dorothy is raising him, not us. Dorothy is doing her job. That's what we pay her for. No, Jennifer shook her head firmly. It's not a job. She loves him. She raised him with love while we were busy building careers. And is there something wrong with building careers? With giving him the best life possible? There is, when the best life possible doesn't include the presence of his own parents. Richard was silent for a moment, then stood up and went to the window, looking out at the dark garden. I don't know how to be different from who I am, he said finally, his voice low. I don't know how to be that kind of present father you want me to be. Neither do I know how to be that kind of mother, Jennifer admitted, but I want to learn, and I want you to learn with me. And if I don't want to change? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Jennifer looked at the man she had been married to for 18 years and realized she barely knew him. They were business partners who happened to share a house and a son, but they had never really been a couple, never really been a family. Then we're going to have a difficult conversation about the future of our marriage, she said, and surprised herself with the calm in her voice. Richard turned to look at her, surprise written on his face. Are you giving me an ultimatum? I'm being honest. I don't want to live like this anymore, Richard. I don't want a life where work comes first and family comes when there's time left. And if you don't want to change, then maybe we shouldn't be together. Because of an accident? You're throwing away 18 years of marriage because of an accident? It's not because of the accident. It's because of 18 years of absence. The accident just made me see it. Richard sat back down, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. I don't know what you want from me. I want you to know your son, really know him, not just as a name in your planner or a financial responsibility. I want you to know what he likes, what he fears, what he dreams of. I want you to be present. And what if I try and can't do it? What if I just don't know how? Jennifer Harrison stood up and went to him, sitting by his side. Then we'll learn together. It's not too late, Richard, but it has to be now, because Ethan won't stay a teenager forever. In a few years, he'll go to college, he'll build his own life, and if we're not there now, we'll miss our chance. Richard looked at her for a long moment, and Jennifer saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. Fear, vulnerability, uncertainty. He had always been so confident, so self-assured in the business world. But here, facing the possibility of losing his family, he was scared. All right, he finally said. I'll try. Don't try. Do. I'll do it, he corrected. And Jennifer saw a flash of determination in his eyes, the same determination that made him a brilliant businessman. Maybe, just maybe, he could channel that into something more important. Dorothy's move to the house in Park Slope happened 3 weeks later. Jennifer insisted on being there to help, as did Ethan. Richard, surprisingly, also showed up. The renovated house was unrecognizable. The walls had been painted in bright, cheerful colors. The ceiling had been completely redone. The kitchen was new and functional. There were 3 spacious bedrooms, one for Dorothy, one for the children, and one for Barbara. The bathroom had been adapted for Barbara's needs, with support bars and a safe shower. When Dorothy entered the house for the first time and saw everything ready, she simply stopped in the middle of the living room and cried. Kevin and Emma ran around excitedly, exploring every corner, their loud voices of joy echoing off the walls. Barbara sat on the new cozy sofa, running her hands over the soft fabric, silent tears streaming down her face. This is too much, Dorothy said, turning to Jennifer. It's too much. It's not, Jennifer replied, holding Dorothy's hands. It's the least you deserve. How can I thank you for this? You already have. Every day you took care of Ethan. Every gesture of love. Every time you were there when I wasn't. You've already given me more than I could ever repay. Ethan was with the children, showing them the cool tricks he'd discovered with the smoothly sliding windows, the cabinets that opened with a touch, the new TV in the living room. His excitement was genuine, and Jennifer felt a wave of pride. Her son had a good heart. Despite her, he grew up kind and generous. Richard was helping unload the few things Dorothy had brought from the old house. It wasn't much. A few boxes of clothes, some personal belongings, old photos. Everything fit in a small van. Jennifer realized that family had lived with so little, while she was drowning in things she didn't need. That night, after everything was arranged and the children had finally gone to sleep in their new beds, Jennifer, Richard, and Ethan sat in the living room with Dorothy and Barbara. "There's one thing I still don't understand," Barbara said suddenly. She had spoken little throughout the day, but now her voice was clear and direct. "Why are you doing all this?" It was a fair question. Jennifer looked at Richard and Ethan, then back at Barbara. "Because Dorothy saved my son. And because I realized I've been living my whole life wrong, chasing things that don't matter, ignoring the ones that do. And you think money solves that?" Barbara wasn't being hostile, just pragmatic. "You think you can buy absolution?" "No," Jennifer admitted. "We're not trying to buy anything. We're trying to do the right thing." "Finally." "Barb, don't be like that," Dorothy intervened. "They're trying to help." "I know. I just don't want you to get hurt when they realize that charity acts make rich people feel good, but don't actually change anything real." Barbara's words were harsh, but there was truth in them. Jennifer could make Dorothy move to a better house, could increase her salary, could provide material comforts. But did that change the system that created Dorothy's situation in the first place? Did it change the fact that millions of other Dorothys were still struggling, working multiple jobs, barely surviving? "You're right," Jennifer said, and saw surprise in Barbara's eyes. "An individual charity act doesn't change anything systemically. But it's a start, and I don't want to stop here." "What do you mean?" Dorothy asked. Jennifer looked at Richard, who nodded slightly. They had talked about this. "I want to change my company. I want to implement living wages, real benefits, humane working conditions for all employees. Not just for executives, but for everyone. The people who clean the offices, who serve coffee, who do maintenance. Everyone deserves dignity." "That will cost a fortune," Barbara pointed out. "Yes, it will. But we'll still make a profit. It just won't be an obscene profit. It will be fair. Your partners will hate this. Some already do, but I'm the majority shareholder. And if they don't like it, they can leave." Ethan was looking at his mother with an expression of admiration she had never seen before. And that, more than any successful business deal, made Jennifer feel she was on the right path. "Besides," Richard added, and everyone turned to look at him, surprised that he was contributing, "I'm considering using part of my investments to create a fund, to help families in situations similar to yours, so children can have access to proper health care, education, basic needs." Dorothy and Barbara looked at each other, then back at Richard. "Are you serious?" Dorothy asked. "Yes, it was actually Jennifer's idea. She made me realize we have more money than we'll ever need, and there are many people out there who need basic help to survive. Why not use our resources to make a difference?" "Why now?" Barbara asked again, still skeptical. "Why, of all the families that need help, did you choose ours?" "Because Dorothy chose us first," Jennifer answered. "She chose to love my son when she had no obligation to do so. She chose to donate blood to save him. She chose to be human when the world teaches us to be cold and distant. And that taught me something I had forgotten, that we're all connected, that no one is truly separate from others, and that when we see someone suffering and do nothing, we lose a little of our own humanity." The silence that followed was broken by Kevin, who appeared sleepy at the bedroom door. "Grandma, I can't sleep, the bed is too soft," he said, rubbing his eyes. Everyone laughed, and the tension in the room dissipated. Dorothy got up and went to her grandson, picking him up even though he was already getting too big for that. "Let's see if we can get you used to good things," she said, kissing his hair. And as Jennifer watched Dorothy carry Kevin back to the bedroom, singing softly to him, she felt something fundamental change inside her. It was no longer about guilt or redemption. It was about understanding finally what it meant to be human, to be imperfect, to be capable of change, to be connected to others in ways that money could never buy or sell. In the weeks and months that followed, Jennifer's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. She started spending more time at home, working only 8 hours a day and leaving the office at 6 sharp to have dinner with Ethan. At first it was strange, forced. They didn't know what to talk about, but little by little they began to truly get to know each other. Jennifer discovered that Ethan loved photography, but never mentioned it because he thought she wouldn't care. She discovered he had a natural talent for math, but hated the pressure they put on him to be the best. She discovered he had a girlfriend, Olivia, whom he'd hidden from her out of fear of her reaction. She discovered he wrote poems, dreamed of traveling, wanted to make a difference in the world, and the more she learned about her son, the more she regretted all the lost years. But Dorothy taught her something important. It's no use getting lost in the past. What matters is what you do from here on out. Richard was changing too, although more slowly. He started leaving work earlier, being present at dinners. At first it was awkward. He didn't know how to talk to Ethan beyond asking about his grades. But Jennifer saw the effort, and that was something. One night, she surprised Richard and Ethan in the garage, working together on an old car engine Richard had bought. Both were covered in grease, laughing at some inside joke, and Jennifer felt her heart warm. Maybe it wasn't too late for them either. Dorothy continued working for the Harrison family, but now it was different. Jennifer no longer treated her as an employee, but as part of the family. They often had dinner together, Dorothy bringing Kevin and Emma, who quickly became like younger siblings to Ethan. One afternoon, while having coffee in the kitchen, Dorothy shared more about Michael, her son who had passed. "He was so much like Kevin," she said, looking out the window where the children were playing. "Same smile, same energy. Sometimes when I look at Kevin, I see Michael. And it hurts, but it also heals, you know? Like part of him is still here." "Do you think he would be proud of you?" Jennifer asked softly. Dorothy thought for a moment, wiping away a tear that escaped. "I hope so. I've tried to honor his memory by doing good, taking care of other children, loving other kids. It doesn't replace him. It never will. But it gives purpose to the pain." "You're an amazing person, Dorothy," Jennifer said, and not for the first time. "You turned tragedy into love." "We do what we can with what we're given, Mrs. Harrison. I had no choice but to move forward. I had Ashley to take care of, then the grandchildren. Life doesn't stop because we're suffering. But you could have become bitter. You could have closed your heart. I could have. But then Michael would have truly died, you know. As long as I keep loving, as long as I keep caring, he lives through me." Jennifer took Dorothy's hand across the table. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For being you. For not giving up on Ethan when I gave up. For teaching me it's never too late to change." "You didn't give up on him, Mrs. Harrison. You just got lost along the way, but you came back, and that's what matters." The changes Jennifer implemented in her company weren't easy. There was resistance, a lot of resistance. 2 of her partners left, selling their shares. Some clients cancelled contracts, saying she was getting too progressive and that it was bad business strategy. But other clients stayed. New clients came, attracted by the company's ethical stance. And most importantly, the employees responded in ways Jennifer never anticipated. The cleaning staff, who used to be invisible, working in the early hours when no one was there, now had decent schedules, living wages, and health benefits. Jennifer made a point of learning each of their names. There was Teresa, who had 3 children and worked 2 jobs to support them. Now she only worked 1 but earned enough to live. There was John, who had arthritis but kept cleaning because he needed the money. Now she had access to proper treatment. There was Lucy, who dreamed of finishing college but never had the time. Now the company was paying for her studies. Each story was a different Dorothy. Each person was someone being crushed by the system, struggling to survive, invisible to those who had the power to make a difference. And as Jennifer learned these stories, her anger grew. Not anger directed at specific people, but anger at the system that allowed this. Anger at a society that valued profit above people. Anger at herself for having been part of it for so long. But anger wasn't enough. Anger needed to turn into action. 6 months after Ethan's accident, Jennifer organized a meeting with other business owners. It was a small group, just 12 people, but they were all influential. She wasn't sure if they would come, but everyone showed up, curious about what she had to say. Thank you for coming, Jennifer began, looking around the conference room she had rented for the occasion. I know you're busy, so I'll get straight to the point. I want to form a coalition of companies committed to ethical practices, living wages, and real social responsibility. There were murmurs around the table, some skeptical, some interested. Such organizations already exist, pointed out one of those present, Marcus, owner of a restaurant chain. Yes, and most are just a facade, marketing. They put a green seal on their products but continue to exploit workers behind the scenes. I'm talking about real change, total transparency, independent audits, genuine commitment. This will cost money, said another, Amanda, CEO of a tech company. Yes, it will, but we can still make a profit, a fair profit. I'm not asking you to become a charity. I'm asking you to be human. And why should we? The question came from Robert, an investor known for his aggressive business approach. In the end, companies exist to make money. Social responsibility looks good on paper, but it doesn't pay the bills. Jennifer looked directly at him. Because it's the right thing to do. And because we're creating an unsustainable society. When people can't earn enough to live, eventually the system collapses. And when it collapses, it doesn't matter how much money we have in the bank. It's in all our interests to create a more equitable society. That's very idealistic, Robert grumbled. Maybe, but I'd rather be idealistic and try to change things than be cynical and perpetuate a broken system. There was a tense silence. Then Amanda spoke. I'm in, she said. My company already implements some of these practices, but we can do more. And having other companies doing the same would create a new market standard. Me too, said Marcus. My daughter works at one of my restaurants to learn the business. She was horrified by the conditions the other employees face. I told her it was normal, that everyone starts that way, but she said something that haunts me. Normal doesn't mean right, Dad. She's right. One by one, others around the table expressed interest. Not all. Robert and 2 others left, dismissive. But 9 stayed. 9 business owners willing to try. It was a start. Ethan, meanwhile, was finding his own voice and purpose. Inspired by the changes he saw in his mother, he started a project at school, a tutoring program where students from his private school helped students from public schools with their subjects. I don't understand why I have to go to the best school just because you have money, he said to Jennifer one evening. That's not fair. Education should be equal for everyone. Jennifer smiled, proud. You're absolutely right, but until the system changes, we can do what you're doing. Use the privileges we have to help others. That's what Dorothy does, Ethan said. She always shares what she has, even when she doesn't have much. Yes, she teaches us a lot, doesn't she? Mum, Ethan hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret it? How things were before? Jennifer thought carefully before answering. Yes and no, I regret losing so much time with you. I regret being so cold and focused only on work, but I don't regret the path that brought me here, because now I know what really matters, and I wouldn't have learned that without having lived the other way. Do you think Dad will really change? Or is he just pretending? The question was difficult. Richard was trying, but Jennifer saw it was a struggle for him. He was deeply conditioned by work culture, by the idea that personal value comes from professional achievements. I don't know, she admitted honestly, but he's trying. And that's something. Have you noticed the change? A little. He's been coming to my basketball games. He never came before. See, that's progress. But he's on his phone half the time. Rome wasn't built in a day, Jennifer said, using the old cliché. Real change takes time, especially when someone's fighting years of conditioning. You changed quickly. No, I didn't. The change had been happening inside me for a long time. The accident was just the trigger that made me face it. Ethan nodded, absorbing this. I like the new you, Mum. Those simple words meant more to Jennifer than any business award she'd ever received. The first year after the accident was transformative. Jennifer not only changed her personal life, but began seeing the fruits of changes in her company. Employee turnover dropped dramatically, productivity increased, and surprisingly, profits didn't plummet as some partners predicted. In fact, they stabilized at a different but sustainable level. The fund Richard had proposed became reality. They called it the Michael Foundation, in honor of Dorothy's son. The goal was to provide medical, educational, and financial assistance to low-income families who were struggling. Dorothy cried when she learned the name. It was one of the few times Jennifer saw her completely speechless. He would have been so proud, Dorothy finally managed to say. "We couldn't have done this without you," Jennifer replied. "You taught us to really see the people around us." The Michael Foundation started small, helping a few families, but it began growing, funded not only by Jennifer and Richard, but also by other business owners from the coalition Jennifer had formed. One of the first families they helped was Teresa's, the cleaning employee with 3 children. Her oldest son had exceptional musical talent, but the family could never afford lessons. The foundation not only paid for lessons, but provided a proper instrument. 6 months later, he was accepted into a prestigious music school with a full scholarship. Every success like this was a victory, not just for the family, but for everyone involved. It proved that change was possible, that investing in people had real returns, even if it wasn't measured only in money. But not everything was easy. There were challenges. Dorothy's sister Barbara developed health complications and needed surgery. Although she now had access to proper health care through the benefits Jennifer had secured, the operation was risky. Dorothy was terrified. "I can't lose anyone else," she confessed to Jennifer the night before the surgery. "I've lost too much already. I can't lose my sister too." "You won't lose her." Jennifer held her hand firmly. "She's strong, and she has the best doctors now." "But what if it's not enough? What if—" "Don't think like that. Think positive." But Jennifer understood the fear. Since almost losing Ethan, she had lived with a constant low level of anxiety. The fear that something could happen, that she could suddenly lose someone she loved. It was the price of finally letting people in, of truly loving. Barbara's surgery was successful. The recovery was long and difficult, but she survived, grew stronger. And throughout the whole process, Jennifer was there. Not out of obligation or guilt, but because Dorothy and her family had become part of her life in a way she never anticipated. One evening, about 14 months after the accident, Jennifer, Richard, Ethan, Dorothy, Kevin, Emma, and Barbara were all gathered at the Park Slope House for dinner. It wasn't a special occasion, just a regular Thursday dinner that had become a tradition. The children were excited, telling stories from school. Kevin had just won a prize for best student in his class. Emma had learned to read and wouldn't stop showing off her new skills to anyone who would listen. Ethan was helping both with their homework, patient and kind. Richard was truly present this time, not fiddling with his phone, actually engaged in the conversation. He and Dorothy were debating amicably about the best way to make beans, both defending their regional recipes. Barbara was stronger, laughing at something Kevin had said, her eyes shining with renewed life. And Jennifer, watching all this, felt a peace she had never experienced before. It wasn't the empty satisfaction of closing a big deal. It wasn't the adrenaline rush of beating a competitor. It was something deeper, more lasting. It was belonging. It was family. It was love. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, sitting beside her, while the others continued talking. "About how lucky we are," Jennifer replied. "About how everything could have been different if Dorothy hadn't been there that day. Do you think the accident had to happen? For you to change?" Jennifer reflected on that. "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I would have eventually realized it myself. But the accident sped everything up. It forced me to face truths I was avoiding." "Sometimes I think it was good," Ethan said quietly. "I know that sounds terrible. I almost died. It was scary. But what came after? Having you back for real. Having Dad trying. Meeting Kevin and Emma, all of it. It was worth it. It shouldn't have taken a tragedy to bring us together. But it did. And that's okay. What matters is where we are now." Ethan had a wisdom beyond his 16 years, or maybe Jennifer had underestimated her son all this time. "When you're older," she said, "and have your own choices to make about career and family, I hope you remember this moment. I hope you choose differently than I did." "I will choose," Ethan promised. Because you showed me it's possible, that we don't have to choose between success and family. We can have both, we just need to have our priorities right. Jennifer hugged her son, feeling tears of gratitude stream down her face. She had almost lost this. She had almost lost the chance to truly know this extraordinary young man she had brought into the world. But she hadn't lost it. And now, every day was an opportunity to build something better, something true. "Mrs. Jennifer," Kevin called from the other end of the table. "Come see. Emma read a 3-syllable word." Jennifer stood up, wiping her tears, and went to where everyone was gathered around Emma, who was proudly holding a children's book. The little girl looked up, her big eyes confident. "Butterfly," she read slowly, pronouncing each syllable carefully. "That's it. You did it." Jennifer applauded along with the others, and the joy on Emma's face was contagious. Those were the moments, Jennifer realized. Not the grand gestures, not the generous donations or corporate changes, but these small moments of human connection, of shared joy, of simple and true love. She had spent so much time chasing grandiosity that she forgot life is made of small moments. And now finally she was present for them. The challenges continued, of course. Life isn't a fairy tale where everything resolves perfectly. Jennifer Harrison's company faced financial difficulties for a few quarters. Some employees were still skeptical about the changes, thinking it was just a phase that would pass. The business coalition she formed faced criticism from others in the corporate world, being accused of being naive or even harming the economy. Richard had relapses, moments where the old habit of working late returned, but Jennifer was there to remind him, gently, of what truly mattered. And slowly, very slowly, he was learning. Ethan had his own struggles. The pressure at school, the anxiety about the future, the normal challenges of adolescence amplified by the trauma of the accident. But now he had a support network. He had a present mother, a father trying, and a second family in Dorothy and her grandchildren. And Dorothy, despite all the improvements in her life, still carried the pain of losing Michael. There were bad days, days when sadness consumed her. But she had support now. She had people who cared. She had means to process her pain properly through therapy that Jennifer insisted on and paid for. 2 years after the accident, on a winter night in New York City, Jennifer found an old journal she had briefly kept during college. She flipped through the yellowed pages, reading about the dreams of her youth. "I want to make a difference in the world," one entry said. "I want to build something important, something that matters." She had completely forgotten about that dream. Somewhere along the way, making a difference had turned into making money, and important had become synonymous with profitable. But now, 2 years after nearly losing everything, she was finally returning to that original dream. The company still existed, it still made a profit, but now it also had a purpose beyond profit, and the Michael Foundation was making a real difference in the lives of families who would otherwise be struggling alone. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fixing all of society's systemic problems, but it was something. It was a step in the right direction, and maybe, if more people took similar steps, the overall direction could change. Jennifer closed the journal and looked around her home office, a space she had redesigned to be welcoming instead of intimidating. There were photos on the walls now, photos of her with Ethan, photos of the whole family, including Dorothy, Kevin, Emma, and Barbara, photos of simple but precious moments. Her phone rang. It was a message from Dorothy. "The kids want to know if they can sleep over tomorrow. Is that okay?" Jennifer smiled and replied, "Of course. Ethan will love it." Of course, she thought, as if there was any other possible answer. Those children were part of her life now, part of her extended and non-traditional but wonderful family. The next morning, Jennifer woke up early. It was Saturday, but she had a habit of waking up early that years of corporate life had ingrained. But instead of jumping to the laptop and starting to work like she used to, she went down to the kitchen and started making pancakes. Pancakes were Dorothy's specialty, but she had taught Jennifer how to make them. The first attempts were complete disasters, but now after much practice, Jennifer could make decent pancakes. Ethan appeared sleepy half an hour later, drawn by the smell. "You're making pancakes?" There was happy surprise in his voice. I'm trying. Kevin and Emma are coming later. I thought they'd like that. They'll love it. Ethan sat at the kitchen counter watching his mother cook. You know this is kind of surreal for me, right? What? You. Here. Making pancakes on a Saturday morning instead of being at the office or on some business call. It's surreal for me too, Jennifer admitted. But it's the good kind of surreal. Are you happy now, Mom? Really? Jennifer stopped stirring the batter and looked at her son. You know, I used to think I was happy before. I thought success and money equaled happiness, but it was fake happiness, empty. Now? Yes, I'm happy. Truly. And you know what's funny? What? I have less money now, less status in the corporate world, less professional recognition, but I'm richer in everything that really matters. The doorbell rang, and Ethan jumped to answer it. Moments later, the house filled with the excited voices of Kevin and Emma, with Dorothy following behind carrying a bag of clothes for the kids. Good morning, she greeted cheerfully. Did someone say something about pancakes? Mrs. Jennifer is making them, Ethan announced proudly. Really? Dorothy pretended to be surprised. Well, I need to see this. The morning that followed was chaotic, loud, and absolutely perfect. The kids covered their pancakes with absurd amounts of syrup. Ethan taught Kevin some video game tricks. Emma insisted on showing Jennifer every drawing she had made during the week. Dorothy sat with a cup of coffee, watching everything with a content smile. What are you thinking about? Jennifer asked, sitting next to her while the children played in the next room. About how strange life is, Dorothy replied. 2 years ago, I never would have imagined this. This house, these happy and healthy children, you here with us instead of in some office. 2 years ago I was lost, I just didn't know it. You weren't lost. You were where life had taken you up to that point. And then something happened that showed you a different path. It was you, Jennifer said. You showed me a different path. It wasn't me. You already had everything inside you. You just needed a push to see it. A push? You saved my son by donating blood, Dorothy. It was more than a push. Dorothy smiled, but there was old sadness in her eyes. I couldn't save mine, but I could save yours. And through him, through all of you, Michael lives on in a way. His love continues, and that gives me peace. The two women sat in comfortable silence, listening to the children's laughter, the sound of life happening around them. The journey wasn't over. There was still much to do, many lives to touch, many changes to implement. But sitting there, in that moment of peace and contentment, Jennifer knew she was finally on the right path. She was no longer the cold, distant businesswoman who put profit above people. She was no longer the absent mother who outsourced love for her son. She was becoming something better, something more human. And it all started with a simple act of love and sacrifice from a woman society had tried to make invisible. A babysitter in a yellow uniform who donated blood not because she had to, but because her heart didn't know how to do anything but love. On that quiet Saturday, as the morning light bathed the kitchen and the sound of children laughing filled the house, Jennifer finally understood what it meant to be truly rich, and it had nothing to do with money. End of story. And you, what did you think of this story? Could you see how small acts of love can transform entire lives? Dorothy's attitude changed not only Ethan's life, but that of an entire family. Leave in the comments what you felt, and if you would do the same as Jennifer did. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories that will touch your heart.